Assalamu alaikum, my dear student. Welcome. I am Khujistar Browning Liza, lecturer English, Anandabhan College, Mymensingh. This is the class for honors second year, and our subject is English. And today our topic is history. Uh, you know, my topic is Reformation, so I will revise it again. Reformation in literature for you. At first, lesson outcome. Our learners will be able to say about Reformation, and they will able to explain its impact on literature. I wish they can explain its role of religious thought in literature, and finally I think they can write the impact of Reformation in English literature. The impact on impact of Reformation on English literature. Today our topic is, again I am saying, impact of Reformation on English literature or in the growth of English literature. The point or the characteristics or the impact in a shortcut way, if we see at a glance, we can see this is religious movement. Then this is second point is against papal authority. I mean religious movement, that means this Reformation is essentially a religious movement, and actually Reformation is a revolution against papal authority. This revolution is also against churches' corrupt practices. On that time the churches were too much corrupted, and for that reason this revolution begins. And I can also we know, or you know, that this is a religious, political and social and economic revolution. All the sectors are affected by this revolution, and in literature we get many religious changes. One of them is translation of Bible, the Book of Common Prayers. I will explain it later. And we also find on the time the New Testament translation, which is by Tyndale, and by this New Testament, this translation of Bible, the Book of Common Prayers, all the stuffs are were on that time the subject of common people. Before that time, before that revolution, the common people cannot get these books for themselves. They have to go to the father or to the church to learn or know the Bible. They couldn't read it themselves. But after this revolution, you know that all the common people get the chance to read the books, read the religious books, their sacred books. And after this period, the Protestantism arises. Before that, Roman Catholicism was the only one Christian religious sector, and this Roman Catholicism was failed by the corruption of church's authority. This New Testament translation, this translation of Bible, for the Book of Common Prayers, we get the development in English language and development in English prose. We also get biblical dialect in literature, cultivation of classical languages that help to achieve Elizabethan literature. So next, Sir Thomas More, an well-known author for writing the book Utopia. I will explain it in detail later. Sir Thomas Eliot for the Governor, the Thomas Wilson, the Art of Rhetoric book, and the Elizabethan literature. Finally, the base of Elizabethan literature. This is for Reformation actually. For that reason, Reformation is important for us, because we get Elizabethan literature before, after Reformation period. Reformation period is the base which makes the basic changes in literature and in Elizabethan literature, which is the most flourished, most successful literary genre which we get in Elizabethan period, and for that reason Reformation is important. Now I am explaining it from the first. Religious movement. This Reformation is of course a religious movement, and it emerges in Western Europe in 16th century. The Reformation was based on the opposition of the people to the claims of papal authority and the Church of Rome. Actually, this is this is a breakthrough of religious changes. The English church churches had a break with churches of Rome. I mean, you can say it from Pope or Roman Pope. It had the avowed aim to reform and renew the church, but proved to be finally a great force against it. But this movement, the Reformation, is actually occurs for the corrupted practices of churches, and for their corruption, people were very much bored with them, so they didn't want to get any to give chances to these churches to rule them. On that time, church had an immense political power beside the king, so church can exploit the common people. So for that reason, these Catholic churches were too much corrupted, and their authorities are too much corrupted for their corrupted practices. They extort money from the common people, so people were too much bored with this type of authorities. For that reason, it was easy for the common people to break with Church of Rome. Okay, then the Reformation of England was at once a religious, political, social and economic revolution. It had an intimate involvement in the cultural and literary aspects of England. Under its impact came the translation of the Bible, the Book of Common Prayers, and a number of religious tracts, sermons and devotional books. The translation of the Bible was made by two devout reformers, Miles Coverdale and William Tyndale. Tyndale's translation of the New Testament was published in 1525, and this translation of the Bible are found to have made remarkable contributions to the development of English language, particularly of English prose. The introduction of the biblical dialects with force and ease also given it a richness of style. Such translations may well be taken as the appropriate preparations for the momentous authorized translation of 1611, a grand achievement of Elizabethan literature. Then the effect of the Reformation is perceived in the completion of a prayer book from Latin under the title The Book of Common Prayer in 1949, and it is found to have a sponsoring effect on the growth of English language by means of appropriate cultivation of the classical languages. Again, on that time the scholars practices classical languages, and finally there was Sir Thomas More, a great scholar and humanist who had immense knowledge in Greek and Latin. He was a friend of Colet, Lilly and Erasmus. He was the author of a number of Latin works. He finished his famous work, The Utopia, 1516. This single work, though written in Latin, was a memorable event in the history of English literature. Sir Thomas More actually is the most noted of the early English humanists. He is known chiefly for his Utopia or the Kingdom of Nowhere. Actually, Utopia means the Kingdom of Nowhere. A work which was originally written in Latin but was translated into English in 1551. And it was praised as the first movement of modern socialism, and it is also the masterpiece of English humanism and the time prologue to the Renaissance. Sir Thomas More opposes vigorously the old conceptions and traditions and the accepted order of the society. He opposed the spirit of chivalry with its emphasis on war and the war and the glorification of warriors. He advocates humanitarian ideals, hates wars, and calls soldiers men slayers. I mean the killer of men. Actually, More is called the first of the modern socialists, and he is against private property. He condemns the existing conspiracy of the rich against the poor. If we analyze, we can see here actually before Thomas More, the people were used to glorify war and glorify the warriors, and the people were used to put the warriors or as the heroes and as the god. If we see in the Greek literature or Greek civilization, but this is the Thomas More in his Utopia. He flourishes the new idea of humanism. In his humanism, he started to establish the idea that wars are useless, and why we have to kill the other people. Why we have to kill the people? We need peace and we have to survive in this earth. So why we will kill the people, and why we need the war? So he also we are getting another important idea from this book, that he condemns the existing conspiracy of rich against poor. If we see anywhere before or in present time, or if we look at the past or the present time, we can see that there is always a distinction between rich and poor. The richest are always trying to suppress or oppress the poor people, and they are trying to extract money from the poor, and they are trying to get the maximum facilities from the poor, and for that reason the chaos arises in a society. If we want to establish a better society or a better looked society or corruption free society or a fair society, we can see that we need to be fair with all the people, and we should not have class distinction. Class distinction is an evil thing. I think this is an evil thing, and which arises anger in people, in the human heart, and always arises distinction between people to people, and that is the major issue of social destruction or social degradation. I think More opposes in the medieval area of asceticism and makes healthy enjoyment the end of human life. He advocates religious toleration. This is another important idea of religious toleration, which we can find in Utopia by Thomas More. Religious toleration is very much important besides the class distinction, because racism is another evil in the society. If we want to stay happily, live happily in a society, we need to live with all the people together of all the religion. We need not to discriminate with other religion, other people and other religion. All of them are equal. So if we can develop this type of mentality or psychology in ourselves, then we can live a happy life. So all religions are equal. Not even Christianity enjoys an special privileges. he advocates that all the religions are equal. Not even Christianity enjoys any special privilege and privileges. The utopia embodies More's conception of an ideal state, but it is also a vigorous satire on the abuses, corruption, and errors of the age. In More's utopia, he finds for the first time as the foundations of civilized society the three great words: liberty, equality, and fraternity. I wish, my dear student, you can realize the motto which we can find in our French Revolution, this liberty, equality, and fraternity, and the impact of this work, this work Utopia on Elizabethan literature is undeniable. And I will say something about William Tyndale, who translated the New Testament. William Tyndale was the most important member of the group scholars known as the Cambridge Reformers. He is inspired by the example of Martin Luther to begin his translation of the Bible in 1522, and he used the original Greek and Hebrew Bibles. The translation was completed by his friend Miles Coverdale. And Tyndale's Bible is not merely a religious work but also a work of great literary significance. It is not merely a translation but also a work of Protestant propaganda. After this Reformation, we get Protestantism in our society after Roman Catholicism, because for the corruption of Roman Catholic churches and the advocates of Roman Catholic Church or the fathers, the people were most devoted to find a more flexible religious concept, or another religious concept of Christianity, which will give them more freedom to practice their religion, and also that will help them to enjoy their life themselves. The notes which Tyndale was added as a strongly critical of Roman Catholic creed. He fixed once for all the style and tone of the English Bible. Its style and tone are popular. Tyndale himself tells us that his ambition is that even a peasant should read his Bible. So all the people get an entrance to Bible, to read it and to understand it by this translation. And for that reason, all the people are get entrance in the Bible, so we get the biblical illusion, the simplicity, and the biblical dialect, and all the stories and the concepts from the Bible in our common literature. So this translation has a huge impact on literature for the future. Future literature. We can find it in Elizabethan literature also. The most developed sector, most flourished section of English literature. If we say something about Sir Thomas Eliot, this Sir Thomas Eliot was an educationist of the age of Reformation. He is only known by his book The Governor, 1531. It is a treatise on education written for those who would be called to govern the country. Who will govern the country? For those peoples he wrote this book. And this book is dedicated to Henry VIII. Thomas Eliot wrote this book by dedicating this book to Henry VIII, and we find it Renaissance humanism in his book, in this book The Governor. Again, if we think about Sir Thomas Wilson, who wrote The Art of Rhetoric. This is he was an educationist too, but he is solely concerned with the problem of style. He is concerned with actually literary characteristics, but characteristics of literatures or languages. In this book, The Art of Rhetoric, he advocates purity and simplicity of language. So he was actually wrote this book for showing us some fundamental theory of literature. We find literary discourse in his book. we find different concepts from his book, concepts of literature from this book. And then finally, these two men, I mean Sir Thomas Wilson and Eliot, are well known for their book for this on this time. Okay. To sum up, it can be said that there are some works of a scholarship based on the study of the classics. Classical language, people get interested in classical languages in this period. So the need of these religious reformers discussed above to speak to the people, lead them to use plain neglected English, and in this way development of English prose we find. And after this period we find humanism in English literature. Humanism is very much important for the after literature. After that period we find Elizabethan literature. Elizabethan literature is the most flourished literature where we find humanism. Before this period we find that in our literature the influence of religion is too much, and their human being is neglected. The emotion of human being, the individual of a human being was neglected. But after this period, in literature we find that the human emotion is an important factor. We can't neglect the people. Who will lead the people? Common people is important in literature. Who will read the literature, and that will touch their emotion. So humanism, individualism, all of the criteria we started to get in our literature after this period. So finally, for Elizabethan literature, I should say you something about Elizabethan literature, because Elizabethan literature, this is the product of Renaissance. The Renaissance was the essence of an intellectual rebirth, and Renaissance means rebirth, reawakening. The Renaissance was the period in which the great revival of learning, which started in Italy in 1930 in 13th century, and 13th century, and which came to England in the second half of the 14th century. So, and reached full blooming. The Renaissance is rightly regarded as a chief force in the making of modern European literature. In Elizabethan period, we get our Milton, our Shakespeare, or their great works. We also find then Henry Vaughan, then Cleveland. We find the John Donne and metaphysical poets, and George Herbert, Andrew Marvell. All of the people we used to get them after this period. In Elizabethan period, Jacobean period, and Puritan ages, we get this type of great people in our literature. So Reformation period is the base of those periods that produces the great works in literature, that Elizabethan, Jacobean and Puritan period, and with great people we find. So I wish I should stop today. Thank you, my dear student, and I will provide you with much more information in next class. I wish, and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.